Welcome to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. I'm your host, Mari Riesberg. Over the past several years, I've combined my degrees in acting and somatic psychology to share my sustaining creativity techniques with performers. And now I've decided to share it with a bigger audience that includes you. I believe we are all creative, and this podcast is all about that. I'll be interviewing people from all backgrounds, ages, and creativity experiences to share just how creative we all are. Today, I'll be chatting with Tim Ringgold. He's a board-certified music therapist, columnist, author, and host of the Reduce Your Stress podcast and summit. Please enjoy Tim Ringgold. Welcome to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. Today, I am here with Tim Ringgold. He is a music therapist, author, host of the Reduce Your Stress podcast and summit. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, Mari. It's great to be here.
You are so welcome. I'm super excited to have you here to chat with me about creativity. But before we dive into questions, why don't you just take a couple of minutes and let our listeners know a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Well, once upon a time, way back in 1970, but I'm just kidding. I am a chronic jokester. That's why I'm so excited us hanging out, because we both like to see the fun in life and laugh. We like laughs per minute since whenever we're chatting are high, and I love that.
Yes.
So that's what the next period of time is going to be chock full of. So I've been on stage for 44 of my 48 years now. I was like, oh God, am I going to say it? Oh God.
And you did, you said it.
Did.
You
Just
said
own
it.
Own that middle-agedness. And it was as a singer. I'm a vocalist. I'm a guitarist in the music realm. Those would be my primary instruments. Mm-hmm. And I just found that I am at home on stage. It's just a very comfortable place for me. I'm also an athlete, and I found that I'm at home when I'm like, not just metaphorically, but literally, because the sport I play currently is pickleball. When I'm on the court, when I'm expressing myself, either as an artist or an athlete, I'm just tremendously at home. What I do, what my company does today, we provide music therapy for adolescents, young adults, and the elderly. Adolescents and young adults who are struggling with mental health issues. We help them emotionally regulate with music. Provide probably about 180 groups a month nationwide. And that's really inspiring, helping that many families kind of turn the corner. And that all started because music showed up for me in my darkest moment. So, it was like music for most of us is there in the good times, but most of us can look to the bad times and find music was there too. Yeah. And so in back in 95, I was at a concert, I was at a show. And while I was jumping around, screaming my head off, and I come from a small town in Connecticut, while I was at this concert, my 5 best friends were murdered. And I went to 5 funerals in 4 days.
Oh, God.
I would wake up, bury a friend, get as hammered as possible, pass out, and then wake up and have to do the whole thing over again. Yeah. And again, and again. And the night of the last funeral, and I sang a song at all their funerals because I was like the resident minstrel, and that was my way of saying goodbye. And it tore me up, but my community told me how much it was healing, and they just embraced me for it. And I was like, well, good for you, because that was terrible. I really didn't know what they were talking about. The night of the last funeral, one of my 2 remaining friends said, you want to go see a live show? And I was like, yes, please. And we went. And for the first 2 hours since I'd gotten the news, I was at peace. And no amount of drugs, alcohol, porn, food, cable had numbed that pain all week. And I just spent the whole week stacking as many of those behaviors on top of each other as possible. Right. Nothing did the trick like music. And it was that's when I kind of realized what my community was talking about. I was like, oh, that's what you meant. And that in that moment, I really saw like, okay, that's it. This is my purpose, is to help people reach for music in their toughest times. And so started out as a recording artist doing that, and then turned into a music therapist when I wanted to live a little bit more of a sane lifestyle, have a family, have a marriage, not be on the road, not be around sex, drugs. I mean, they say sex, drugs, and rock and roll in that order for a reason, people. That's all I have to say. So finding this career as a music therapist was phenomenal, because now being creative is something that I teach as a coping skill for teens, because recovery is an act of creativity. Relationships are an act of creativity. And, you know, you can build creativity like a muscle, and your relationships can get better, because there's some really interesting research with music and frustration tolerance, where kids with music lessons can stick with frustrating activities 11 times longer than kids without music lessons.
Wow.
Yeah, that's like a massive difference, right?
Yeah.
Between like sticking it out or giving up. And most people do things till they get hard, then they do something different. And so being able to teach this kind of concept of being creative for the purposes of self-regulation and survival and relationship management and stress management is like, it's really cool, because people don't put two and two together like that instinctively. And when I can connect those dots for people, it's very rewarding.
Yeah, I really think so many people think creativity is just a gene you are born with or you're not. And the fact that you're showing people, no, this is a muscle that can be flexed and used and enhanced through all of these things that you're doing with music is amazing.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I find I don't get tired of talking about it. And I don't get tired about, actually teaching it.
Yeah. Wonderful. And you've got a podcast too, and you do all sorts of other things also.
Yeah, the podcast, it's really interesting. Quick story on the podcast. So as a healthcare professional, I used to work in inpatient hospital on the palliative care team. I would see the sickest, most symptomatic patients in the hospital. And my TED Talk is kind of about that. And it is rough working inpatient, and people like, it's like people just don't know. They just don't know because the stakes are so high.
Yeah.
And that's before COVID.
Right.
And then COVID hits, and then it's everything turns upside down. And I was just like, what can I do? So what had happened in March, I started going on Facebook every night for 40 nights. I did a 30-minute Facebook Live of me playing acoustic guitar with a loop pedal and just creating these really chill instrumental, stories, if you will. And they were like, I was enjoying it. It's good for me. People were logging on the West Coast during dinner, on the East Coast before they went to bed. People were falling asleep to it. And it became this thing, and it kind of grew its own legs. And then I was like, well, there's 20 hours of really good material. Well, probably 10 hours of really good material and 10 hours of 5 hours of good material, 5 hours of okay material. Let's be honest. And I was like, I want to create like an album that I can release for nurses and for healthcare professionals who are working in these inpatient settings. But like, I was like, oh my God, if I try to do a record, that's going to it'll be like August. That'll be so far in the future. Ha ha ha. This is going back a year at this point, right? Like, but it seemed like it would be way far out. And I listened to a podcast of a DJ who curates a set of really chill music and puts it out roughly every month. So my wife said, why don't you just release it as a podcast instead? Ding. And she's my business partner and, life partner. So I listen, and I thought, I could release one song at a time. I could work on one a week. That quickly became too hard. That was like, oh, that's too much. So it's one every other week. And then hosting a online summit about stress reduction. We've done 2. We're going to do a third one coming up next month in August. And we have a ton of great content from all these great speakers. So what I do now is like, there's one interview a month that's one of those experts. there's 2 songs a month. And then I interview other musicians who write similar types of music. And we kind of peel back the curtain and kind of talk about the creative process for us and how fascinating that journey is. And then just let people in on that conversation. And I'm in a professional podcast community. And the host of that community is like, Tim, no joke, your podcast is like the most unique format of a podcast out of any I've come across. Like, I come across a lot of podcasts, but yours is really unique. And I wasn't sure if that was a good thing or a bad thing, to be honest. Right. Cause not sure about that.
Thanks for the honesty. That's great. Yeah. I love it. I think it's so important that, your vision of supporting people through music is so wonderful. And you make it really accessible for people who think, oh, music therapy, what is that woo-woo thing?
Right.
But by saying, no, it's a podcast you can listen to like you would anything else.
Yep.
And it's really accessible. It's in your home. You don't have to go anywhere
That's right.
to have access to it. I think what a gift.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's been very rewarding. The whole premise was healthcare professionals have to commute into the hospital. This was my thinking. And so the podcasts are short. It's like one of the shortest form podcasts I've come across. Like, the average length of a podcast is like 43 minutes, 38 minutes. Mine are typically 15.
Nice.
So there are these little chunks, and the songs are typically 7 to 10 minutes. That's it. Of these instrumental kind of meditations, so that someone can listen to the track on the way into work. And that kind of sets their mood. And then they can listen to it on the way home.
I love it.
And they can leave work at work.
So important, that leave work at work.
Leave work at work.
It's so important. Well, thank you for sharing all of these pieces about who you are and what you do. But let's dive into some questions.
Sure.
So when you think about creativity, what does it mean to you to be creative?
Well, for me, it's not linked to being artistic, first of all. And I had to kind of decouple, unlink the two of those things. Because to express yourself, like you're either reacting or creating. You're either generating something into existence, or you're just absorbing something that already exists. That's, for me, the difference between like creativity and reactivity. And you can express yourself. I can express myself creatively in all types of expression that may or may not have anything to do with art. Or the arts. And there's this great poem, and I don't remember who it was by, but it's in the poem, the person who talks about that your medium is life itself. And I got that as a gift maybe 20 years ago. And someone had gifted me this poem, and I was like, I love that. Like, I can think about my life expression as this ever evolving expression of creativity. And from that moment, it really was a fascinating, almost like a gift, to be able to think about creativity so freely and not to think that I have to have a pen in my hand or a paintbrush in my hand or an instrument in my hand in order to be creative. And that was really cool, bouncing off point. And then it evolved into problem solving. And here's the example. So everyone of a certain age has had sneakers at some point with laces. It's pretty safe. And when they were a kid, they rode these sneakers into the ground, and those laces got beat up, and those sneakers got beat up, and that little plastic tip on the laces came off. So I never knew what the name of that little plastic tip was until Phineas and Ferb did an actual episode about it. It's called an aglet, Aglet. And I'm guessing it's some dude's name who invented it. But boy, is that was creative. Boy, let's bound the tip of this lace so it doesn't fray, right? So I tell people all the time, I'm like, when you had to relace your shoes, what'd you do? when there was no aglet. And inevitably there comes like 3 or 4 answers come up pretty regularly. Like, are you a lick and twister? Right. People will raise their hand. Are you a Scotch taper? Right. Are you a burner? You know, you had a lighter and you just kind of burn the frayed ends. Do you stick one through as a guide and just pull the rest through? Come on, you're all coming with me. You know, and you almost wreck the lace in that effort. But you got creative somehow to get that lace through. And what you did is you solved the problem. You solved the problem of no aglet. And whenever I share this ridiculous, you know, example with people, I'm like, creativity is the muscle you flex when you solve problems, and you do it all day, every day. So it actually like occupies these 2 spaces in your life. One of this like creative expression, and 2, this really practical problem solving, where instead of just reacting to something, you stop and you respond in some new way to solve whatever that situation is. And that was getting creative. And then people realize everybody's creative.
Yeah, absolutely. When you think about your own life, what are some everyday issues that you have had to use creativity to solve?
Well, I'm looking up at the lights right now in my video studio. And one of them, when I dropped a box on top of it and snapped it, and I was like, I'm not going to buy a new one. So how am I going to rig this and re-rig it so that it stays in my life? And that involved me like cutting pieces of plastic to replace the pieces of broken plastic, glue that in, and then glue that to that, and this to that, and the other thing. And I'm not the handiest guy out there. And I always joke that I'm as handy as I need to be. Because being handy, again, for me, isn't like something I choose to do. It's something I have to do. So if you look around my house, there are frequently, I'm in my garage is my converted like office studio. We did some soundproofing, put some lights in, and vibed it out with my IKEA curtains behind me. But if I look on the garage door, for example, I have this beautiful tapestry from Costa Rica hanging on it. But it took some real creativity to figure out how to mount that onto a garage door successfully in a way that it looks like it's just floating, right? That was like, oh, that's really interesting. Or how do I hide all of the crap in my garage so you can't see it right now? And so it involved suspension curtains from ceilings instead of from walls with wall valances. So there's like, I can look around just the room I'm in right now, and I can see all these little examples of really functional creativity. And then I can look at my wife, and you can look around our house and you can see all these examples of expressive creativity, because all of the beautiful colors that pop in every room, all of the plants, all of the wall decor, all of the tchotchkes, all of the beautiful plant, like not the plants themselves, but the way she'll like take an old chair, repaint it, repurpose it outside as a plant holder. And there are these little micro zones outside in our house where there'll be like these clusters of succulents. And it's wondrous to look at. And so it's fun because she and I create differently. And so it's nice to really sit back and let her, express herself that way and watch it and know what's happening. And then for me, it's more of the practical problem solving, handy as I need to be.
I love it.
Kind of thing. But the other side of it is in the realm of like I'm recording new songs every other week. So check, but I play this sport called pickleball. Pickleball is kind of like, it's like miniature tennis, or like tennis on a badminton court. It's this combination of racket sports where you play with a plastic ball and a paddle, and it's a net sport and it's a ball sport. So it's just easier on you than full tennis, because tennis is just grueling. But when I'm out playing pickleball, as you learn the sport, there are moments in play where there are opportunities to express yourself, and you have choice, and you can create shots, and you can create situations. And then there are times when you have to respond and react to what's being, kind of pushed on you. But I I find myself in the creative flow and expressing myself on the court. And it's a wonderful experience, because what I can say about creativity is when I'm in it, there's no past or future.
Yeah.
I'm just in it, and I'm just in the present moment. I'm in this very moment, and something's about to happen, and it's just the greatest. And so I find myself trying to be either on the pickleball court or in the studio as much as humanly possible, or on a stage, whether mostly virtual these days, but soon physical. Because in those settings, I'm finding that I'm doing the creativity that's the expressive creativity rather than the pragmatic creativity.
Right. Very functional. Nice. Yeah. I mean, I love the description and the difference between the two, the functional creativity and expressive creativity. And yeah, like if you can't find a screwdriver and you use a butter knife to tighten a screw, is that very functional creativity, but using a tool or an item in a fashion that wasn't originally intended.
Yes.
But we think, like, how often do we do that? All the time.
All the time.
But I really appreciate that distinction. I don't know that I've ever really thought too much about how we can differentiate those types of creativity, because I think there are different types, and you shared it very well.
Yeah. And if I just drilled down on my creative process with the songs I write, that in and of itself is distinct. So I write a very specific style of music. It's instrumental guitar music using a loop pedal. So it's like this narrow, like, parameters.
Yeah, you've got some boundaries that you're working with.
Yes. And what I've noticed about writing music for single guitar with loops is that there's a certain number of octaves on a guitar. There's only so many parts you can write before you are bumping into yourself, where you're talking over yourself in the same frequency.
Yeah.
Because there's no change in timbre. So timbre is the color of the instrument. So if like a saxophone is singing one note and a guitar is singing that same note, they still sound different because the color of the sound itself is different. But when you're only using one guitar, you can't share the note. So it kind of forces these constraints on creativity, which is also a fun game in and of itself, right? And so when I'm writing, there tends to be a line that's like me open, got a guitar handy. So it'll be like where it's kind of like what you're used to with an open position with an acoustic guitar. If someone's strumming along, playing folk music, they're playing open, what are called open chords at the base of the neck. But then there are what we call inversions, where you can play the same chord an octave up. So now you're here, and it's different pitches within the same chord, so they can coexist nicely together.
Yeah.
And my song, and then there will be a bass line, which will be an octave down, where I have this octave pedal where I can be playing. And it's not competing because it's an octave down. So there's room for everybody. And then it becomes, as I'm writing, me asking my guitar, well, first of all, asking my 3 guitars or 4 guitars, which one wants to, who's got something to say?
Yeah.
And allowing kind of this intuitive process to just allow for this, whatever wants to surface. And then which order of operations do we want to go? Inversion? Do you want to go first? Melody? Do you want to go first? Arpeggio? Do you want to go first? Bass line? Do you want to go first? Rhythm section? Because I'll tap on the guitar to do a kick, and I'll strum to make a snare. Do you want to go? And allowing for just the difference of who comes in first, then who follows. It gives all this freedom within those boundaries.
Yeah. And it really sounds like your subconscious and conscious minds have such a collaborative connection. Well,
the key to that is this thought. And here's the thought. The thought that I have is that I am not the source of the music.
Mm-hmm.
So I think about the music as being energy, and that there is an unlimited amount of energy in the universe.
Yeah.
And I am merely opening the gates for some of it to flow through me in some order.
Yeah.
In some such way that produces what we would call an effect. And the effect is called a song. So I'm not the source. I don't have to come up with it. It already exists.
Yeah. I think that's, I think a lot of people struggle with that. I am not the source. It already exists. And our conscious mind analyzes and says, oh no, that's terrible. That's bad. I'm not going to follow that source, whatever. And so being able to really have that understanding within yourself that this is what it isn't to be analyzed. It is just here to be.
Yep.
And others can make an interpretation or have their own experience. There isn't one version that needs to be had.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really been very liberating to just follow that thought. Because it's just a thought. I had the thought, it's my thought that, I don't own the thought even, but it's just an idea, that there's all this energy out there and that I'm just allowing it through me. And what's been very satisfying as an artist, it has been this other composers, when I say it, they nod their heads like, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like I feel the same way. And I noticed the moment that I gave up that I was the source of the music, I had an unlimited supply of music. And then the most satisfying part of it all is to sit back and listen to it when it's done and enjoy it. And what's interesting about that, and this what makes complete sense in my head, I have a template for what I like to hear.
Yeah.
So I let that through. That's what I let through. I let through what I like to hear. So I end up playing what I like to hear. And then I like listening to what I end up playing. And that's been so satisfying as a musician. Like I can't even express, like in the last year, I've released 33 new tracks of music.
Wow.
Now, let's just put that in context, right? Like the typical album, let's say it's got 10 songs on it and an artist releases. If they're a prolific artist and they're releasing an album a year, they're releasing 10 songs a year.
Right.
Right. So in 1 year, I went from 0 before the pandemic. I released 0 music before the pandemic.
Yeah.
I released 0 music in 2019, 18, 17, 16. I didn't release any music since 2003.
Wow. Yeah.
That's how long it's been since I've released music. And then I just decided to get out of the way, let the music come through. And the result has been music. And I have thoroughly enjoyed the music that's come through, more so than I ever did when I was trying to write the songs myself.
Right.
It's been immensely satisfying to just let it come through, because what I found, what comes through is what I enjoy.
Nice. What a gift to give yourself. Get out of your own way.
Get out of your own way.
Be surprised by what shows up. And it sounds like really just enjoy it too, that you're enjoying what you're creating and making. And I'm really curious, you haven't talked much about this, but I imagine you experience creative challenges at times. How do you face creative challenges?
Deadlines.
Okay.
Yep. I like to call them lifelines. It sounds a little cheesy, but nothing triggers creativity and productivity for me like a deadline. It's just, I think, so there's, and then the second thing I would say that's really helpful for triggering creativity and getting over the challenges is creating boundaries, constraints, if you will. I find that constraints are immensely liberating. And if I can get it right, there is a quote from Igor Stravinsky, who's a pretty famous composer. And he said something to the effect of, give me constraints or give me boundaries so that I might be free.
Yeah.
Because once you then you know the space you're working in, and what it does is it automatically eliminates all the other possibilities. And so you can kind of, the human ability to focus is finite. It's very, flimsy and it's not so hot. So you really got to do what you can to rule out all of the infinite possibility out there. And one of the easiest two ways to do that is, one, give yourself box yourself in with some sort of boundaries and constraints. And then two, give yourself a time box, a time deadline.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you have to let go of whatever perfectionism you're dealing with, because you literally don't have the time.
Yeah.
And just having a podcast, my promise is that a new episode is going to drop every Monday. So songs are coming out because they have to. This song has to be done. Like, I'm in a mixing of one right now, and I track on Tuesdays, and it was like, this needs to be done by the end of the day. So there's an intention that just becomes like, there's a laser focus that comes from that. And so that's been, when I don't have deadlines, it's murder on my creativity. Murder. So deadlines, give me deadlines, please. I thank you for the deadline, and give me boundaries. Someone says, will you write something? I'm like, you need to tell me how many words.
Yeah.
Or would you give a talk? I'm like, you need to tell me how many minutes you want me talking.
Right.
As soon as you do those two things, I'm free.
Yeah. It's amazing how constraints and boundaries can really enhance creativity and give it a life that it may not have had otherwise.
I find that I'm not overwhelmed by the infinite possibilities that are out there. I remember being 22 and considering leaving home. So I grew up in Connecticut, and I was considering, I never considered leaving the Northeast. And then one day I considered leaving. And it was overwhelming, because it was like, where am I going to go? And then the thought was, you can go anywhere.
Right.
And then my head exploded. It was like,
right.
What? I can't wrap my brain around that, And then it was like, well, my dad relocated to Tempe, because my brother relocated to Tempe. And then the thought was, Tempe. What about relocating to Tempe or whatever? And then suddenly possibility was like clear, like, oh, I could do that.
Yeah.
But I remember going to the library, because this was before the internet, and researching cities to relocate to. And it was like, oh my God, this is so overwhelming. But when I put a boundary on, I'm going to move somewhere that I have family.
Yeah.
Then it was like, that made it a lot easier. And so
surprise,
infinite possibility can be overwhelming to the mere mortal brain.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it just sounds like you have such a propensity, just your willingness to try things and follow ideas is very unique, I think. I think a lot of people have a lot of ideas, but we do a lot of discounting or, saying they're trash or how could I ever do that? And how do you feel like you trust yourself enough to follow the ideas that you have?
Yeah, it's funny. I definitely think that I would call myself an idea person. So there's a marketer named Dean Jackson who one day in the car was describing this. How everybody likes to come up with their own personality profiles, and they're none of the pretty much none of them are scientifically validated, i.e. Myers-Briggs, ladies and gentlemen, is not scientifically validated as a personality scale at all. So just having said that, he came up with his own framework one day. It was just a thought, right? I think people can be put into 4 categories. Okay, Dean, why don't you tell us what you think they are? He's like, there are what people, first of all. I was like, what does that mean? He's like, it's like idea people. They think up the what. And then there are who people. and they're like the networkers, and they like know immediately who could help.
Yeah.
And that was like, okay, I'm buying this. I'm picking up what you're putting down. And then there are the how people. And those are like the engineers who can actually like think about putting that in a sequence of steps in the right order in time to actually produce whatever the what was. But the what person is not also a how person frequently.
Fair.
And the how person is not usually a what person, right?
Yeah.
And then there's a when person.
Okay.
And they're like the managers who can coach something into existence through time and like have a pie chart or a graph or a spreadsheet or a timeline and operate from it happily and thrive with that. Now you give a what person a timeline or a spreadsheet and their head explodes. You ask a when person to come up with a new idea, their head explodes. And I thought, this is really fun. Okay, I like it. I'm buying it. I'm going to take it. And I decided when I looked at that, like I know for myself, I'm definitely a what and a who type of person. Like I really like, I like thinking about what isn't. What would it be like if, you know, and I just have like an insane amount of curiosity and kind of like a thirst for novelty. And then I'm an extrovert, like mad. So I'm definitely like a who person. So I love connecting people but like getting stuff managed into existence is like not my thing. But my wife is a how and when person. And so we complement each other really well.
Yeah.
And she became my business partner 2 years ago. And when that happened, and I knew it would happen the day I could finally wrestle her from corporate America, I knew that my own productivity in terms of what we build and create in the world would go through the roof. And sure enough, like before my wife, after my wife joins my team, like the amount of things we've created in the last 2 years, the platform we've created, published the book, created the podcast, run 2 summits, created a coaching program, creating a membership program, created an online course, like just like all this stuff now exists because we combined those things.
Yeah.
And I think that creativity works best in collaboration.
I agree.
That's where I was going with all this was like, what I've found to be true is that I alone am kind of like incomplete in the manifesting on that creativity. And like, even on the pickleball court, it's a double sport.
Yeah.
Right? Like I need 3 other guys
right. To play
to be able to express myself. It's a collaborative effort. So I have found that like the scale of creativity, as you can scale collaboration, you can scale creativity and scale manifestation.
Yeah.
And that's been kind of like I thought that would be the case. And then I've seen that to be true. Like, nice. Oh yeah, this is definitely the case.
Yeah. So. Collaboration and community are such a huge component to creativity. It's really hard to be creative in a vacuum and have all these ideas. And then what do I do? What do I do with, where do I take this idea?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. I have an idea file. You know, because it's like, I could just be like, bloop, 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 bloop. Because again, I have a thought, which is that they're not my ideas, that there's an infinite number of ideas and they're like frequency bands. They're just out there and you can just tune into them and whoop, you're listening to a song because you tuned into that frequency on your dial. I just dated myself, but I had that. And then I heard Tony Robbins, who's a huge mentor of mine. I heard him say the same thing and about feelings and thoughts. He's like, they're not yours. They're frequencies and you're tuning in. And I was like, validation. And when I remember that, it's great.
Yeah.
The challenge is remembering that.
Right. The challenge is remembering that. Well, how would you encourage others to find creativity in their life?
First, by trying on this same idea, which is that you don't need the pressure of thinking you're the source.
Mm-hmm.
And it might, you need a little bit of an ego to be able to produce things and put them out in the world for people to judge. But it's tremendously relaxing to not need to take credit one way or another for it. Yeah. So just try that on, that there's an unlimited support, an unlimited source of ideas that are waiting to be expressed. And all you have to do is just figure out your own process for getting your ego out of the way. And then it'll come through you. And then you're going to need your ego to come back so you can hit publish.
Nice. Yeah, right. Okay.
And the ego is a very useful thing. We need it. We love it. Otherwise, it's here for a reason. It's not to be thrown away. It's just when you use it and when not to. So I consider myself not the author of my music. I'm the instrument of my music. I'm the engineer. I'm the
conduit.
I'm the conduit. And that's the word that Vangelis, who's this great guy who wrote Chariots of Fire theme, which for me as a kid was one of the most influential pieces of music I had ever heard. He calls himself a conduit. And I just found that out by interviewing another artist last week when we were having this very similar conversation. And we were talking about how do you get out of the way so that, because writer's block, I love that phrase because it's think about the words in that phrase. It's not writer's empty.
Right.
Writer, right? It's not you don't have it. You're in the way.
Yeah.
Writer's block. And it's oh, I'm blocking it from coming through. Okay. So I just got to let go of the outcome. I got to let go of what it looks like. I got to let go of knowing. And I just got to trust that what I put out is going to be stuff I enjoy. And then since there are 8 billion of us walking around and we're not that different. So if you like stuff, there is a whole tribe of you out there that likes the same stuff.
Yeah.
You're not that unique. Sorry, folks. I hate to break it to you. We're very similar. If you like something, there's a tribe of you out there that likes it too. So put something out that let something through that you like, paint something that you like, create something that you like, whatever your medium is, do it to your own satisfaction. There's a tribe of you out there that also like that same thing. So if you're looking for that kind of group validation, or you're looking to sell it, or, whatever, they're out there. So don't worry.
Nice. I love it. All the tips and tools and skills and magical pieces. Thank you so much. I just have one more question for you.
Sure.
What is your secret to creativity?
I think we've kind of touched on it, which is that I'm not the source of it.
Okay.
That's been the biggest game changer in my life.
Yeah.
The day I realized that it didn't come from me was so relaxing. It's no more pressure. It's not about me.
What a relief.
Totally. And on the pragmatic problem solving side, someone else has had the problem before. I'm pretty sure I've never encountered anything for the first time.
Yeah. So some common humanity understanding as well.
YouTube. What YouTube is, baby. YouTube is the source of all problem solving because someone else has had the same problem and they had to get creative and they were generous enough with their time to video the solution. And you went, thank you.
Well,
thank you for doing that because I don't have to pay you any money. You were very generous with your time to put this out there so that the world is a better place.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for taking the time to chat with me today. And if people want to learn more about what you do, how would they go about doing that?
Easiest thing to do is just find me at timringgold.com, 2 G's. And you can find my podcast on there, which is called Reduce Your Stress. We have our Reduce Your Stress Summit coming up next month in August. If you are somebody, if you know anyone who works in healthcare, this has been a brutal year for healthcare professionals. We're kind of tailoring the content towards them, but it's really for, everybody can benefit. But when you go to my website, there's a gift for you waiting there. When you get there, you'll see my big bald head smiling at you, and it'll say, want to take a relaxation vacation? And you'll say, why, yes, Tim, because I haven't taken any other kind of vacation in 18 months. And so you'll put in your name and email address, and you'll download a 15-minute relaxation experience that I've used with thousands of clients and patients over the last 12 years, where I take you out of the stress of the moment, walk you back in time with my classical guitar to a time where you were just feeling a 10 out of 10. And I reconnect you with that. And then you get to bring those feelings back to the stress of the present moment so that you can be at your best. So that's my gift to you. Go download that. It's super yummy.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of your wonderful pieces with me today. It has been such a treat.
Thank you for having me. This has been super fun.
Thanks for listening to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. We'd love to keep in touch, so follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We are at Sustaining Creativity. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Tag your friends and family so they can listen too. We love to hear from you, so leave your reviews, comments, and questions. Check out our website, sustainingcreativity.com, for upcoming offerings and creativity coaching. Tune in Tuesdays for our next episode. And remember, with creativity, anything's possible.